when I got to the Packers, coming out of the agent world, new to the business, new to the industry, I kind of felt like, hey, I want to prove myself out there. I want to get these deals that are good for the Packers, not as good for the players, and frankly, win. But when I say win, I lost. Because what I learned early in my career with the Packers was I was losing relationships. And I was getting some side-eye looks from players who got locked up long-term below market. And it just sort of taught me, like, you want to leave stuff on the table. This is about relationships. The same people you negotiate with on your way up are the ones you negotiate with on your way down.
Welcome to Negotiation Warriors. I am Cliff Stein, and I am on a never-ending quest to learn what it takes to be a great negotiator. In every episode, I will sit down with some of the greatest negotiators in professional sports who will share insights, knowledge, and draw upon their real-life negotiation experiences. Negotiation Warriors is sponsored by Front Office 360, premium cap management software. To find out how we are helping college athletic programs, go to frontoffice360.com to schedule a demo. All right, welcome back to Negotiation Warriors, the podcast that features conversations with the greatest negotiators in professional sports. I'm your host, Cliff Stein, and today's guest is actually my co-host, Andrew Brandt, one of the most respected and multi-dimensional voices in the business of sports. That's also the name of his podcast. He's a longtime colleague and friend, former NFL executive, served as vice president of the Green Bay Packers, worked for general managers such as Ron Wolf, Ted Thompson, the late president, Bob Harlan. Andrew is a negotiator. He's negotiated over $1 billion in contracts, including Hall of Famer Brett Favre, Charles Woodson, even future Hall of Famer Aaron Rodgers. During his time with the Packers, he played a key role as a player contract negotiator, salary cap manager, and building rosters during a time when the Packers were a very successful team. Before that, he was an agent, representing players, which gives him the rare dual perspective from both sides of the negotiation table. Today, Andrew is a leading sports analyst, writer, law professor at Villanova, and consultant. He's a trusted voice across all media platforms. He's the definition of a negotiation warrior, someone that has mastered the art from every angle. He's been a mentor for me. Andrew, please welcome to Negotiation Warriors meets your podcast, The Business of Sports.
Yeah, Cliff, thank you so much. I'm glad we're able to do this. And as a veteran in the podcast game, I welcome you and appreciate all you've done. For people who don't know, people sometimes think in the cold-hearted competitive business of sports, if you're a rival, especially a division rival, especially a blood rival over 100 years, you have to be enemies. And Cliff and I are the shining example of colleagues, well, he of the Bears, me of the Packers, that were always friendly, always comparing notes, always kind of checking in with each other, even though, like I said, we are these rivals within our own division. And anyone who's followed the NFL just knows the Packers-Bears story. And it's gotten obviously much more intense these past couple of years. So right away, it's just nice to be on with you, Cliff, as a true friend and a colleague that was more of a friend than a competitor. So that was really nice through all those years. You obviously were there a lot longer than I was in the division, but we enjoyed those Packer-Bears times together as true friends, although we were competitors.
To me, this is a long time coming, but let me say why. Because this first segment, I'm going to call Cliff is not stalking Andrew, or is he? And the reason I say that is our career paths have moved along a parallel course. I was an agent. I was an agent that negotiated with you, and you started out as an agent. I was a team negotiator. Before I became a team negotiator, with the Bears. You were the negotiator with the Packers, and you actually gave me advice on what I should do if I took the job. You gave me some really great advice. When I stopped working for the Bears, I became a professor in sports law. Were already a professor of sports law at Villanova. I am an NIL revenue share consultant. You are an NIL revenue share consultant. I now have a podcast. You have a podcast. Now, I'm not stalking you, but out of all of those, do I get credit for any of them? Doing any of them first? But it really, seriously, going back to me calling you when I was contemplating taking a job with the Bears, and I remember you gave me really great advice, and you even said, make sure when you're doing cap models and you're projecting the team, always think 3 years in advance. You remember that?
I do. It is because I wanted to tell you and tell anyone considering of making the jump that we both made. And I think I was one of the first. Bruce Allen was probably the first. Bruce went from being an agent to a team person, team executive, I think first with the Raiders, then maybe Cardinals, then maybe Redskins at the time. But then it became a little bit of a trend with you following my footsteps and others going from the agent side, Ari Nissim, some others going from the agent side to the team side. But the one difference that is so profound, and I talk about this often, I think I told you this way back, it's so different, as you know so well, being an agent versus being a team negotiator. An agent, I kind of liken to a fantasy football owner or fantasy baseball or basketball owner. You have all these guys on different teams. And frankly, you don't really care how the teams do. And you don't care how the team's outlook is in 6 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years. That's immaterial to you. Your whole focus as an agent is to get your guys the maximum income they can get and the maximum career they can get. As a team guy, and I know I'm speaking to the choir, it's never about one player. Even Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, it's never about one player. It's about how does that player fit among the roster today, tomorrow, next season, and 3 to 5 years from now, because it's all a puzzle. So anything you do on the team side has a direct correlation to everything you do on the team side. As an agent, you do a deal with the Bears, the Packers, the Raiders, the Lions, the Cowboys. They don't have to have anything in common. So as an agent, you're very, very dispersed. And as a team negotiator, it's incredibly important to be consistent and fit everything into that puzzle.
How'd you balance that when you were dealing with an agent and you knew that perspective because you lived it, and you knew just like it was going to be a struggle for them to understand that you want to treat the player fairly in this contract negotiation, but you have all these other players you have to worry about fitting it in the puzzle, like you just said. Did you spend a lot of time talking to agents about it, or how'd you deal with that?
Yeah, it was always important to me. Maybe this is because I was a bit of an educator before even going to the Packers, and maybe that's how I ended up being an educator now. I kind of liked educating the agents about this stuff. Some of them probably rolled their eyes, but all the things we're talking about, fitting into a puzzle, being consistent. The main thing, Cliff, is that you may like an agent really maybe more than other agents. You may like a player more than other players. But I learned the hard way, and maybe you did too. If you do one little special thing for one player, one agent, there's a line at your door. And that's unfortunate. It's just everyone talks to everyone. Everyone knows every bit of a contract. You do a little nice thing in your contract for one agent, it gets out. And I would sometimes tell agents, I really would like to do that. But you have to appreciate, for me, I don't want to deal with the line at my door. And I think that's something that I hope agents empathize with. And that's why, sometimes as a team negotiator, you're like that AT&T customer service person. Like, I'm sorry, our policy will not allow that. And that's kind of what you are, because if we do that language, if we do that structure of a guarantee for you, there goes our policy. And yes, just as we knew what agents were what way to deal with, all the agents know what teams are what way to deal with. This team does this in their contracts, this team does that. And the teams that sort of make exceptions for different agents or players, then they get in trouble.
Well, there's a real art to that. I found that I know you have this, what you just explained, like you were always in a position where you had to tell them you couldn't do something. You had to tell them, but you had to do it in such a way. There was an art to do it that they're going to respect you and they're not going to be frustrated. Um, that's a challenge for a lot of people, especially now that you're working on the college side, working with athletic departments. What were some of the biggest takeaways from you being working for the Packers that you're now able to bring over to that world?
Well, I think a few things. Number one, I remember my early days with the Packers. I'm sure you can relate to this. I'm sort of like in my daily personal life, thousands of dollars would now be millions of dollars. So, like all of a sudden, you're negotiating millions of dollars. And it took me a little while at the Packers, like, wait a minute, what am I doing? I'm giving out millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. And so it took whatever it took, a week, 2 weeks, a month to sort of get numb to that. Now I moved to college and oh my God, like, wait a minute, we're giving college students 10,000 a month, 50,000 a month, 100,000 a month to go to school, to an apartment and a car and a scholarship and charter flights in college. And it sort of took me a little bit to wrap my head around that. And then I sort of thought back to, oh, remember, Andrew, when you started doing this for the Packers, that was tens of millions. Now you're only dealing with $1 million contracts, not tens of millions. So I just sort of had to get that set, like get numb to what we're paying college athletes today. And I won't talk about any individual athletes, but it's like, wow, we're doing that. And the one thing that's become different on the college side is the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, hockey, soccer, they all have what are called standard player contracts. So you're writing up different parts of the contract, obviously the money, some of the bonuses, some of the language, but it's pretty much already set for you. In college, it's all new. It's all ground floor. It's all Wild West. So I, Andrew Brandt, have been writing the contract for a couple different schools. And it just is coming from me. It's not coming from a standard group. It's not coming from the NCAA, from any conference. It's been me. So I feel a lot of responsibility to have a contract that protects both sides. It's so different on the agent side. I mean, we could talk for an hour about this. There's no regulation. There's no NFLPA, which you take a test and you have to have a graduate degree and you have to pay a fee, governance, regulation, none of that. So you're dealing with aunts, uncles, cousins, AAU coaches, pastors, fathers, mothers, whatever it may be. In addition to dealing with the CAAs and Excels and Athletes First, because the money's gotten so big, they're all in it too. But you're really creating a new world in the college space. You're trying to do what I just talked about in pros, keep it all the same, keep it consistent. It's harder in college. It really is, because you're having players that are high leverage players. And, I try to protect at all times against free agency. That was the big driver for player revenue. And in Green Bay, I would go to players early in their contract stream, get them locked up. Sometimes you make a good bet, sometimes you make a bad bet. But don't let them sniff free agency. Don't let them get to the cusp of free agent or, God forbid, become free agents. And you had ability to do that. College, you can't. The one thing that sticks out to me about college sports in this new world is free agency. It's ubiquitous. It's all the time because we have an unregulated transfer portal. So that creates incredible leverage for these players, that they're always free agents. I said to our football coach at Louisville, Jeff Brom, I was out to dinner. I said, Jeff, I'm sorry you got to deal with free agency every year. And he pulls his chair up next to mine, right to my face, and he says, Andrew, I have to deal with free agency every day. Every day. So imagine that. It's something I never dealt with in the NFL. Free agency was maybe 2 or 3 a year. And most of the time you have a franchise tag, there's just not the leverage that you see in college. It's not the money of pro sports, but the leverage of college players is so much better.
And the contract that you're writing, that they're whatever, 18, 19, 20 years old, but they're signing contracts with or without an agent. But as we see in the courts, they're not adhering to them.
It's frustrating. Listen, you and I have both been player people, and we've been on the other side. And if you see on social media, at least the way I view it, there's a cottage industry out there to just clap back at anything that schools or conferences or the NCAA tries to do to create some kind of competitive balance. And they're fueled by the lawyers because, listen, I get it. I'm a lawyer. I teach this stuff. The transfer portal. You go to court. You say, hey, judge, see that engineering major over there? He can transfer every year. See that music major over there? She can transfer every year. And she can go play in the Philadelphia Philharmonic in the summer for $1 million. Why can't student athletes? And judges, to make it very simplistic, judges are like, you're right. It's like, you're right. So we're all looking for a solution. The president had a roundtable. There's so many bills out there. I was pleased. I'll announce here that I was sought out by a congressional committee last week. They're going to schedule some hearings, and I'm going to give my thoughts in Washington at some point, probably in the spring. So that'll be nice. I'm supposedly an expert, Cliff, and I don't have a solution. I wish I did. I'll just say this on the contract, and I'm being self-serving. I'm trying to write a contract that protects both sides. I think from the school side, for lack of a better phrase, I just don't want to get screwed, right? If you transfer, fine, that's your right. But don't leave the school holding the bag in terms of payments. And there should be some penalty depending on what time of year you actually leave the school. And if you voluntarily redshirt, there should be some reduction there. And we can talk about other things that are more granular, but I'm just trying to make a contract that protects both sides because it just seems like there's this groundswell out there that anything you do to try to restrict these players, and at some point these players are going to have to face life, which is not easy. So there's a ton of stuff out there in college sports, and some of it is good, but some of it is frustrating.
I just wonder, too, when I think about the NFL and I go back to like 2011 when there was a lockout, we went into an uncapped year, and then you had a surplus of 1-year deals that really you never recover from because it just becomes a cyclical process where every year there's more and more players on the market and they all want that multi-year deal and they end up doing a 1-year deal. So from supply and demand, after you get through that first or second wave of free agency, the teams have a lot of leverage. And I wonder why that hasn't hit in college. Obviously, we don't have the market data. But then in January, I saw this quote from a unnamed general manager. It was unnamed in the article. It said, the number of players in the transfer portal is out of control, but the agents have all the leverage. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we focus on the ones that get the big deals, right? Whatever number that is. But I had a coach tell me there's a lot of players that quote unquote die in the portal. So you go in the portal, you're not really wanted back. You don't find a home, and you kind of die in the portal. That's not public. People don't talk about that. They talk about the big leverage. The one thing that I keep saying is better than the pros. If you're an NFL player and you're a free agent, you got 29, 30 options possible. It usually comes down to 1, 2, or 3, whatever. If you're in college, just in the Power Four alone, there's 78 schools, right? And all you need is 2 or 3 to bump up the price. So that's what the advantage these college players have. If you're a decent college football or college basketball player, you're dealing with a pool of 3 times what NFL free agents get to deal with. It's not even talking about mid-majors and all of that. I mean, it's just, they have so many options right now. So it gets a little frustrating. And we haven't even talked about the system. And I'll just say this, people don't know a lot about the legality of the House settlement, but the system right now in college sports is being governed by an antitrust settlement. That's wonky, right? That makes things wonky. What's governing college sports right now is an antitrust lawsuit settlement. And, it was not developed by football people or basketball people or college administrators. It was developed by Jeffrey Kessler and the NCAA lawyers. And they're not in the front lines of what we're dealing with, right? You and I and all the people working in college NIL, rev share consulting and contract negotiations. So it's a square peg in a round hole right now.
It seems like there's so many things you could have on that list to talk to the Congress about, whether they can intervene or not, whether they have standing to do it. But it just seems like from the no agent regulation to transfer, so easy to go into the transfer portal, giving you, like you said, free agency every day, every year, to no transparency on the market data, no collective bargaining. It's just amazing, like all the things that you're going to get, a chance to talk to. And hopefully everyone knows it's a broken system and there's no one czar out there that says this is how it needs to be. And that's a challenge.
Yeah. And listen, and this is not a political statement, but I am glad the president is giving it some attention, even if it's spot, even if the roundtable was just more speeches, because the more you get attention from Congress, the more chance we have to put some kind of regulation on this. And I know player advocates want to see no regulation at all, but is that really what we want? When we're trying to fashion a competitively balanced system, the NFL has baked in all this competitive balance with a salary cap that demands compliance, that has consequences. With a draft, I don't know how a draft would work in college, but you see the point. And then, of course, free agency restraints. You can't be a free agent for 4 years. There's tags, restricted free agency. There's tenders. I'm not saying that has to be mimicked in college sports, but regulation is not something to be scared of in college sports. It would only help.
Over the last 2 weeks, you've been interviewed a lot, I think, about things like the Max Crosby trade that never happened, Magic City, strip club, among a few things. So what's going on in the business of sports? What's worth talking about today? What are some of the topics you'd like to address?
Well, I'll reiterate some of the thoughts I had on Crosby. I just think that was a massive story to people, because how could this trade not go through? First of all, everyone has to understand, if they don't already, as you know so well, there's no universal physical. Every team has its own physical. They're very subjective. And they're not only subjective team to team, but I think it's not any great shakes to say this. They're subjective by the magnitude of the player. And I do believe that if it wasn't Max Crosby, but some down the line player for a 6th-round pick, he probably would have passed the physical. Greater risk, greater reward. So when you have a 2 number 1 draft pick trade, you're going to treat that physical like it's the Magna Carta. And it's the same thing. You treat a physical for a potential 1st-round player different than a physical for a guy you may sign as a free agent after the draft. So all those factored into it. I don't think you can say that, hey, Baltimore was trying to get out of something or had cold feet, but you can say there was a higher level of scrutiny with this player than perhaps all other players they traded for in the past whatever years. And both of those things can be true. I laugh when people say, well, now are the Raiders going to get out of all these free agent deals? No, that's not the plan. And they'll make it work cap wise and they'll make it work cash wise. And I'm not convinced Crosby will remain a Raider. He won't get traded for 2 number 1 picks, but he may get traded when, if I'm a buying team, I want to get a little more removed, even months more removed from a knee surgery he had in January. Like, I didn't even know that when this trade happened. I'm like, wait a minute, he had knee surgery? Like, not just a clean out, like a real surgery. So anyway, that was something I think people got a little too over their skis about. It happens, you know. It happened in the NBA. Mark Williams, the center, was traded to the Lakers. They sent him back. You know, it happens a lot. And this is the nature of the business of sports.
I was going to ask you if it happened to you, but it did happen to me. And it was 2022, I believe. And we were in the, the tampering period, and we negotiated a contract for Bengals defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi. And we knew limited information, but you don't know everything until your doctor sees everything. So when he came in, we saw, we found out whatever it wasn't going to pass the physical. And that automatically made me kind of feel for the Ravens. That was a player we really wanted. That was a player, like, we felt terrible that we had to pass. Like, the agent was extremely upset. And I do know the people I know there in Baltimore, they have high integrity. I know everybody wants to go to that place where, whatever, they have cold feet and things like that. But like you said, it does happen.
Happened to me too, Cliff. We had a number 10 pick overall, and years later, a guy named Jamal Reynolds, pass rusher, we traded him to the Colts. I know you've had Polian on here, and they sent him back. I'm like, we didn't think he had anything wrong with his knee, but whatever. They sent him back. And what are we going to do? Question their doctor. I think the one thing I'll say here is that, I've been asked this before. What's one thing that goes on in NFL teams that we may not know or people may not know? I think the time and attention with medical is something people don't really know about. It's an extraordinary time. I was lucky because my best friend at the Packers was our team doc, Dr. McKenzie, who just retired. I would spend almost every day some time with him. Just what was going on? How would it affect our roster building? How would it affect our roster planning, short term, long term? How would it affect guaranteed contracts? How would it affect injury settlements, injury guarantees? All those kind of things where people just think the doc's there that runs out on the field with an injury. It's very important, not just doc, but all the medical training staff. So, and those guys are important. When you talk about free agency, I know a lot of our players are like, yeah, I don't want to leave my trainers. They're like, I don't know what the money is. I don't want to leave this training room. I love these guys. So some of that comes in. People don't really know about that as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that I've seen that too. And that's now that there's institutional dollars involved, I say that is one area where it's an opportunity where you don't need anyone to rule on it. You don't need Congress. You just need structural things internally to address that, because the last thing you want is just, you're agreeing to a contract, you're having a player sign a contract, and then you find out later there were some pre-existing conditions. So I agree with you there.
Yeah, another thing going on is, I'm always asked about the Packers. And sad story. I'm going back there this week for Bob Harlan, the president. When I was there, passed away last week. We're going to have a funeral. But interesting comments by the new president that I thought were really something that struck me, where he spoke to Sport Business Journal and just said, he's a little worried about the future, even though we have a very equal revenue sharing. We have a cap. The NFL allows a team like little old Green Bay to exist because of equal revenue sharing and because of a cap. But he's worried about the future horizon for other reasons. Number one is local revenue. That is not shared, of course. Every team gets its own local revenue. And, maybe the Packers can get a concert a year, maybe even a college game, but nothing like these other big cities where they can whole concerts that last a week, the Taylor Swift or whatever, and those kind of local revenue options. So he's sounding an alarm for that. The other thing, of course, is access to capital. The Packers do have a huge fund. I get it. I was drawing from that fund to pay our contracts, but they don't have billionaire owners and they don't have billionaire part owners, where you now see these teams like the Bills and Eagles and Raiders and Giants and Niners and Eagles all cleaving off 1, 2, 5, 10, 20% of their franchise and making hundreds of millions of dollars. Basically easy cash infusions that give up no control whatsoever. It struck me when policy said that, the new president of the Packers, like, yeah, that is a competitive disadvantage to not being able to access those hundreds of millions of dollars. Even naming rights, we don't know, better than anyone what's going to happen to Soldier Field, the only other stadium without a naming rights deal. But that'll probably change. So is it going to be, Pepsi Center at Lambeau Field? No one's going to allow for Lambeau Field to not be in the title. So all these kind of things are bubbling up. The great story of the Packers is that it can coexist in this world with the Chicagos, New Yorks, LAs, Dallases, but it might get harder. Nothing to worry about anytime soon, Packer fans, but down the road.
Yeah, I saw a clip where you talked about it. I found it really interesting because you've talked about this before, and I think it's really great education for your classes, but also just the fan in general, that there's a big difference between cap and cash. As you always say, cap is accounting. And the cap is a soft cap. You called it a yarmulke, which I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but that's the small beanie that people wear in the synagogue. So it's a soft cap. I like the analogy. But cash is really what everyone is really budgeting when they go into free agency, when they go into their season and planning. They can always manipulate the cap, but cash is whatever their owner, their president, whatever comes from the fund with the Packers allows them to spend. And I was wondering when I heard that too, I mean, they spent a lot of money on one player last year. And I was wondering if they're still recovering from that.
Yeah, it comes and goes. The Packers are public, unlike every other team. So we do get we do see the money come out every year, what they're spending, what they're making, their profit, their loss, their total revenues. So you can't really lie if you're the Packers. It's all out there. But it's cyclical. You had the huge money on Micah last year. You had the huge money on Jordan Love the year before. We'll see what happens this coming year. It might be a down year for their spending, and they've lost some free agents. So that is cyclical. And again, I don't think that's the big driver in terms of, it's just going to be, can you keep up in a way that we, the Packers, are relying on this sort of fund that has built up over the years, that some of it's been invested in Titletown and real estate around Lambeau Field. But it's going to probably get harder, where this, one of the great stories in the world of sports, this little city of 100,000 people competing with, like I said, New York, LA, Dallas, Chicago, they're not only competing, but they're thriving. And going to get harder. Not impossible, but it'll get harder down the road.
Well, there's so many other. I listen to you all the time, and I don't know how you do it because you do it so well. But you talk about like all the things going around the horn. But taking you back over here to my negotiation warriors for a minute, we use the word warrior a lot because everyone has a story. Everyone has faced some type of adversity in their life or a loved one, and they can get stronger from it. They can let it define them. But I'm always curious, especially people that have proven track record of being a great negotiator, what does the word warrior mean to you?
It meant different things at different parts of my career. I'll tell you a story. When I got to the Packers, coming out of the Asian world, new to the business, new to the industry, I kind of felt like, hey, I want to prove myself out there. I want to get these deals that are good for the Packers, not as good for the players, and frankly, win. And I did for a while. I was sort of fortunate, I guess, if the right word, of getting some inexperienced agents, locking up some players long term. But when I say win, I lost, because what I learned early in my career with the Packers was I was losing relationships, and I was getting some side eye looks from players who got locked up long term below market. And it just sort of taught me, like, you want to leave stuff on the table. You want, this is about relationships. The one thing about negotiations and negotiators, it's a long horse race. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And I've learned this through a long career. The same people you negotiate with on your way up are the ones you negotiate with on your way down. These are small, small worlds. This applies to anyone listening, whether you're in finance or marketing or engineering or medicine or law or business. These are small worlds you deal with, and you're going to deal with them over and over again. And I just hoped and tried to prove myself that I was going to be a different kind of negotiator after those first couple of years, where I'm not trying to get over on anyone. I'm trying to make people feel good about dealing with me, and therefore the Packers, and want to deal with us more and want to feel like we left things on the table for them. So it was a learning firsthand. It sounds so simple, Cliff, but you want to tell people, don't be a dick. Don't be a jerk. And that's hard for young people. I teach a negotiation class, and I have young people that are like trying to win, and they're trying to score, and they're trying to get over on their colleagues. And I'm trying to tell them that's not the best thing. It may feel good at the moment, but you're in this for the long term, and relationships matter. And I just learned that. So I would say a warrior is a different connotation than what maybe you think of. A warrior is someone that has empathy and understands the emotional impact of relationships, and a willingness to do business down the road where you might have leverage or you might not have leverage, but be the same person.
Yeah, really well said. And that's one of the keys, I think, of really being a strong negotiator, a negotiation warrior, is that I know in your career, me included, agents had a lot of respect for you. And even though you weren't always doing everything they wanted you to do, they respected you. And as a result, you built a lot of strong relationships. Was it that part of it? Was that part of your secret? Like this realization that I just can't put my foot on their neck every time. Like I have to show empathy.
Yeah, I mean, when Ron Wolf hired me out of being in the agent world, and I was, maybe unlike you, I wasn't really even thinking about it. It just happened out of the blue. He called me one day, and I said, Ron, you deal with a lot of people. Why me? Why me to come to Green Bay? And I remember he was very kind. He just said, listen, you have a nice way of dealing with people. You know your way around these contracts and cap. And you know what? We want to get more agent friendly here. And what better way than to hire an agent? And like a lot of what Ron Wolf said, it just was right to the point and so true, And I learned the importance. Ron was frustrated at that time by the influence of agents, and he recognized not something he wanted to deal with. And he needed a professional. And as I say this, I'm thinking, this is what's happened to college. Like, colleges have always had coaches deal with the players. And now it's business. And now they need professionals. And colleges are turning to NFL, NBA backgrounds like you and I to sort of professionalize that system as well. So it's really repeating what the NFL went through 25 years ago, where we're bringing in more professional people to do this as unemotionally as possible. And I know that's hard because everything's emotional. My saying is, whenever someone says it's not personal, it's business, it's always personal. It's always personal, and I'm happy to hear you say that about my reputation, because same with agents. Like, I don't know if you had this feeling, Cliff, but when we drafted a player, I look at the board, I like I got to go pick up the file and see who the agent is. So I'd have one or two reactions. One reaction would be, oh, shit, it's going to be a slog, this guy. The other reaction is, oh, good. I enjoyed dealing with this person. I look forward to this negotiation. And I tell my students, you want to be the second one. Whatever you do, try to be the second one, the one they want to deal with. And it'll make life so much easier.
Yeah, I mean, we tell, again, this is Cliff Stein stalking Andrew Brandt, but we tell a similar story. I was an agent not looking to work on the team side, got a call from Jerry Angelo, who had what sounds like a very similar vision to Ron Wolf, that, you know, wanted somebody seeing it from the agent perspective, being able to relate to them, and maybe even infuse some tactics that's going to help build those relationships. So I definitely relate to that. And then when I think about what you said about college, and really a lot of the coaches, especially even not football, like the other sports where they don't have the support staff, when you think about what makes a great coach, they're very competitive. They have to be. They want to win. They have to win. They're emotional beings. They're very passionate. They love their sport. They're pretty much transparent. They're going to say it like it is. They're going to be talkative because they're usually the only one talking in the room, and they're super confident. Sometimes overconfident because they have to infuse that confidence level with the team. But when I think about the great traits for a negotiator, all of those things can be a detriment. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, there were 3 years in my Packer experience where Ron Wolf retired, and he basically recommended to Bob Harlan that our young coach at that time, Mike Sherman, could do the job, could be head coach and general manager. And again, Mike was a young guy, not like Bill Belichick or Andy Reid. He was a young guy. And he took on that role. And as you just said, coaches have to inspire, get a guy to run through a brick wall, motivate. When you get involved with the purse strings, that makes it very hard. And to his credit, Mike said to me, Andrew, I'm going to have to make you the bad guy a lot. And I said, I totally get that. I get it. You're right. Make me the bad guy because you have to stay above the fray. And I know you've talked to our friend Joe Banner. He was that for Andy Reid. You have to have these foils so you can stay above the fray as a coach. And that's what's going on in college. And I tell the coaches I deal with, I'm working with 2 schools, stay out of it. Let's identify the players you want. Don't let the professionals handle the business side. And it's going through a metamorphosis in college everywhere. These coaches in college, especially football, have been coach, general manager, chief recruiter, head psychologist, everything. And that's got to change, and is changing a lot of places, probably having a harder time in some places than others, really realizing that. But that's where we are. We're in that metamorphosis for college sports again.
Well, I'm glad that those that are being proactive reached out to you. People like you, I think, have so much to offer them. And I want to be, obviously, I want to be sensitive to the time of business of sports, because sometimes negotiation warriors can be a little bit longer, but I want to be respectful to the boys and girls for business of sports. But I do have a question that I ask every great negotiator, and some of it you've touched on, but to sum up, what are the key traits of being a great negotiator?
Well, preparation is always key, to know what you're talking about and to be 2 steps ahead. I'm a tennis player too, and negotiators are like tennis players. You're hitting that shot really because you know where the next shot's going to go. You'll say something in a negotiation, kind of knowing what the response will be back so you can hit the next shot to the other side of the court. I think that's similar. Preparation allows you to anticipate. And being an agent coming to the team side and coming to the college side, that's all that preparation is so helpful. It's invaluable because you know where the other side is going. The other part is listening. So many young negotiators don't understand. They just don't have to talk so much, right? Silence is golden. Silence is an advantage. Silence is a weapon. Listen more. Because sometimes in those empty space without speaking, your colleague will say what's key. In the margins, they'll say what they really want out of this negotiation, whatever it may be. That usually comes in the margins. It's part of listening. Listening is such an important trait that, again, takes a lot of experience, it seems, to really understand what you come in, where you're going to be in this negotiation. Just listen. And the other thing I'll say about negotiation, in every negotiation, there's what I call inventory. Those are the easy gives, the things you can give away and not feel too bad about giving away. When I was an agent, I used to do a lot of shoe deals, and the Nikes or Reeboks or Adidas or whoever it was, they would always give us merch. Like merch, thousands and thousands of dollars. Come out to Nike, shop in the warehouse for free. And I would tell our clients all the time, like, you don't want merch. Like, I'll buy you sweatsuits and shoes. Don't worry about it. We want the cash. We want real deal. We want real money. So find out what the inventory is and try to just use that to help you later as throw-ins, not the real important deal. And then, like I said before, just understand this is about people. And I remember an agent, I won't mention his name, but I'm sure you dealt with him plenty of times. We get into a big negotiation. Before we'd start, he would simply say to me, "Hey, Andrew, just don't make me look bad." That was it. Like, just don't make me look bad. And I think that, that sounds a little trivial, but that's so true. Everyone they don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to look bad. They want to be fair. I think that's universal.
Yeah, that's a great point. That last one, especially too, because it also signals that that agent, and there are many like this that were maybe stronger as recruiters and maybe less secure as negotiators, or they just knew that you knew more. And that was them saying, I trust you, right? I'm going to trust you. You get one chance. So don't make me look bad because I'll find out later. So that's like also a great point of thinking about what it's going to look like from their perspective and how to give them wins. We talked with another guest before about embellishment, but just how to give them wins that may not be something that's costing you too much, but it's something that might be valuable to them. I also want to give a shout out to Sam Brandt, the music composer. You have an excellent theme. Every time it hits that drop, I get fired up for your show. And Jack Connell, who's a producer,
Yeah.
because I always think about when you say their names, I think about Howard Stern and Regis Philbin when they would bring in their interns and producers and make them part of the show. So love that you bring them up. They do a great job with your show, and I'm excited to have you here. Appreciate all of your wisdom, but more importantly, support and friendship over the years. We're only as good as in life as our advocates and champions, and you have always been one for me. I'm a huge fan of yours, and so it means a lot that we could do this together, and I hope we get to do it again sometime.
Yeah, likewise, Cliff. And you mentioned Sam, who's now a successful music producer in LA. I'm so proud of him. But you knew him when? That just sort of emphasizes how long we go back. You knew him as a little baby boy running around the owners' meetings, and I knew your little guys. One of whom I just taught at University of Miami.
Yeah.
So time does fly, and it's great to see both our kids just thriving. And we push them out of the nest, and we hope for the best. And all of our kids are just doing what we hope they can do, what we always hope they would do.
Yeah. I know you're proud. I am too. And you just, as a parent, as a father, you want them to do something they enjoy, and thinking of all the stress, pressures that we went through, some of it unnecessarily. You can't shield them from it completely, but you just want them to be able to do something that they love and enjoy. So I'm really, really glad to see your kids doing that, and hopefully my kids can get to do the same.
Thanks, Cliff. This has been great. And nice to simulcast our podcast together. I'm glad you're in this world now.
Thank you. Appreciate you. And we'll talk soon.
See ya.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Negotiation Warriors. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe on the Negotiation Warriors YouTube channel and follow us at Front Office 360 on Instagram and X. And to find out how we're helping college athletic programs, go to frontoffice360.com.